Hi, my name is Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss how the loosened purse strings that were supposed to accompany Boris Johnson's Brexit budget have been tightened again due to, well, not natural circumstances, his own policy. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, as I was discussing in a video yesterday, I think it was, Boris Johnson may be politically naive, but he doesn't just ignore facts. He hides them. He hides them from the rest of us, but he doesn't ignore them himself. You know, given that we've somewhat stalled on having the Russian report released, as well as investigations being stalled into his wrongdoing as Mayor of London and a chief proponent of the Vote Leave campaign, I'm going to suggest he's pretty good at burying facts. But he at least accepts them. He just doesn't want the rest of us to. The point being that he knows how hard his Brexit will hit the economy in this country come 2021. In itself, he obviously believes that is not political oblivion for him, otherwise he wouldn't set himself on that path. After all, the last 10 years of Conservative austerity has completely knackered the country, and yet that same Conservative government has just won the biggest general election win in all of those last 10 years. But he does need to carry out a campaign that either mitigates as much economic damage as possible and then for the rest of it blame something else or someone else. And in terms of mitigation, his plan is to spend his way out of trouble. He is trumpeting a quite massive spending spree on infrastructure, generating lots of jobs, quite unlike a Conservative government to do this. All good stuff, but it costs money. Money that he wants his new Chancellor to spend, and the news was actually looking a little better until recently. The economic outlook was being revised upwards. What had happened was, as soon as it looked like we were going to have the transition period till the end of the year, then everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The economy shifted upwards a little bit. Some people called it the Boris bounce. Unfortunately, he did rather shoot himself in the foot with his Home Secretary's somewhat ill-advised immigration plans. And when I say Home Secretaries, of course, these are ultimately Boris Johnson's plans. Not only did it immediately drop the value of the pound, which is never going to have a great effect on your economy, but what it does mean is the economic outlook for the coming year has now had to be revised. Or it hasn't yet, but the warnings are that it is going to be revised down. Now, before being sort of sacked, the previous Chancellor Sajid Javid had unsuccessfully tried to argue for a more moderate change in immigration rules, knowing the impact that would have emerged with the government's immigration plans as they now have been released. He knew that it was going to restrict the government's capacity to spend their way out of self-inflicted trouble. The upshot is that the new Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, has less money to spend when his boss is pressuring him to spend more. But it has another effect on Boris Johnson's plans as well. So his infrastructure spending, which, you know, is long overdue, not knocking his plans for infrastructure spending, but it will require a lot of workers. And we don't have enough of them at the moment, so we're going to need more. The construction industry will need a lot more workers, not fewer workers, in order to realise Johnson's plans. Now, I'm sure you've spotted the slight problem here. Construction industry, because there aren't enough British workers in the construction industry right now, employs quite a lot of migrant workers. Migrant workers that will not be allowed to carry out that work with the government's proposed immigration plans. And as for the prospects of getting even more workers, and it's a lot more workers for these spending plans, that has no chance. So in one fell swoop, the immigration policy has depressed the economy, meaning less money for projects, but also stopped us being able to get the workers to carry out those projects, even if we did have the money. Now, that is what I really call the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing. It is absolutely indicative of the lack of thought that goes into this government's planning. The fact is that Johnson is planning major reforms in lots of areas. What you really should do is have like a map these things out. How is this policy going to impact these things, and so on. For any government, that would take some careful coordination with some very clever people, logicians basically. And yet there isn't even the most obvious linking going on between his government's various aims. You wouldn't have needed to create a map for something like this. I want a massive amount of investment to go on. That's going to generate lots of new jobs. Okay, you're talking about areas where we already don't have enough people in those jobs. We need more. Right, I'm going to introduce a policy now that means it's going to be impossible to get those more workers. In fact, we won't even have the number we have now. How can you manage to do that? So the government now have two problems. One, how to afford the plans with less money. Two, how to get the workers they need, impossible with their immigration rules, without making it look like they're just watering down their immigration rules, which is the obvious way to deal with it. The first one has only two solutions. How do you get more money? You either raise taxes or borrow more. That's it. Both are tricky. Johnson has made a big ploy of cutting, not raising taxes. Now, we know council tax is going up anyway. There are rumours of plans to raise fuel duty as well. There has been quite a lot of pressure to stop the Chancellor being able to raise fuel duty, but that'll be trickier to listen to, with this reduced growth forecast coming out. Now, when it comes to borrowing, we already have quite a large amount of borrowing. But sticking a future generation with a bill for his white elephants is unlikely to bother Boris Johnson. Still, there are borrowing rules and he'd have to break them to do this. And I wonder what other members of his party would say if he were to go down that route. I honestly don't know. In terms of how to get the impossible workers without anyone noticing that they've watered down their much hyped immigration rules, I'll be honest, I expect them to just do it. The Conservatives do it all the time, and nobody notices. They keep talking tough on immigration, and people think that, they're tough on immigration, this party, and they never are. They just say they are. And they could do the same thing again. They've announced the plans. All the people who were in favour of the plans are a cock a hoop about it. If they were never, implemented, no one would notice unless someone pointed it out. And even then, bear in mind when people point things out that the government's done, those sort of supporters don't pay attention anyway. They just won't believe you. So it's bargain. He could just make exceptions for literally everyone. So the rules would be the rules. They'd be implemented. They'd be on the statute books. And then the Home Secretary could draw up exceptions that allow certain groups of people to come into the country to do certain jobs. And those certain groups of people could be everyone in the world. And those certain jobs could be all the jobs we have. And that's how you do it. So that is the financial situation this week. Can't wait to see what it's like next week. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.